Hello and welcome to the Locked Room Devlog. This is going to be a series where I go over the development process of my game, the Locked Room Murder Mystery game. It's a game that I will be running on Kickstarter in, I believe, January at this point, that I currently have an Ashcan version of. So, yeah, I'm also making this video series here on YouTube called Publishing an Indie Tabletop RPG, where I'm going through the steps of like actually taking the game from design into like the finished product, kind of sharing that process as we go. And I find myself sort of blocked there because I don't want to talk too much about the game itself in that series because I want it to be more broadly applicable. Um, but it's very hard to talk about anything without assuming the audience has a baseline understanding of the game that I'm publishing. So that's where this comes in, this new series, where if you are really interested in the actual game that I'm making, you can come and watch this, and then you'll understand what the hell I'm talking about in the publishing series. So that's what I'm planning to do. Here in this first episode, I'm just going to kind of go over the game as it stands, you know, how it's played, sort of a big overview of all of the different moving pieces in the design itself, so that then in the future, whenever I say, oh, I've made a change to this, or oh, I've developed this part, you'll know what the hell I'm talking about. All right. So, yeah, if you have read the Ashcan or played the Ashcan even, this might be interesting to you because it'll show sort of what I've changed so far and what I'm planning to change. But if you haven't interacted with the Ashcan at all, that's fine too. I'm going over the full game. So, you know, if you're interested in what an emergent murder mystery game might look like, if it's designed by me, here we are. So the game itself is a GM-less role-playing game, kind of storytelling game more than role-playing, where you start from scratch and you create a murder mystery. As you play, like as you play the game, you're going to be creating a bunch of characters that will be involved in the mystery. You'll be creating like a detective who will eventually solve the mystery, and then you're kind of mixing the characters up. One of them dies, as dictated by the game, and then the detective starts doing the big investigation. Once the big investigation is done, you know, the game will spit out who it is that actually did it, and then you have to take all of the clues and answers and thoughts that you've generated and tie it all together now that you know the full culprit. So it's sort of meant to be from the perspective, like as players, you're both the authors of the story, but you're interacting with it in the way that like the reader of a detective novel reads. So you see the things that are happening, you get all the information, but you don't know who does it until the very end, until you flip the page and the big parlor room scene occurs, and then of course all of that makes sense with this character, but it also easily could have made sense with basically any other character, and that's sort of the idea of the game. That's the fun part at the end, is coalescing all of the theories into the truth. So, yeah, let's walk through the stages of the game itself. It starts with sort of this optional um, sleuth creation step where you're going to create your detective and the detective's friends. So you know, with this, I have in mind, you know, like the Poirot show, where the main characters of the show are Poirot and then also Inspector Jep and Hastings and Miss Lemon. So like, there's this cast of characters that transcends the mysteries themselves and go with us from mystery to mystery. And so that's what you're making with the sleuth and entourage. And to do that, basically, you'll go through a deck of cards, and every deck of cards in this game is just ace through 5 of the 4 suits. So we just throw away most of the cards because we only need 20, and that'll make sense later why that's the case. But how that works here is you'll take turns drawing a card, and then you'll add jobs, past or present. You know, so if I draw the ace of spades, I can either add a private detective as a job to our detective, or one of our detectives, you know, entourage, or I can make one of the detective entourage's relationship to the sleuth's first client, or I can make one of these characters sneaky. So you'll take turns kind of adding all of these things, you drawing one card, picking one of the 3 things to add to one of the characters, and then you get a cast of characters. You name them all at the end. So what the first playtest that I did of this is here. We've got our sleuth ended up being somebody named Kilroy Woebegone, who is a thief. So a thief and an absolute cad. So not your standard detective, but still going to be solving these murders. An undeniable presence with a top tier bedside manner. The sleuth's rival here is the chief inspector of police, which makes sense given that they're maybe this notorious thief. We've got their romantic partner. We've got this priest that they hang out with that was their first client and dear friend. But then, of course, their sidekick caddy with the distinctive hairstyle, ridiculous mustaches, unknowable career, and frankly a bit off-putting. So if we were to take these characters and then play one or more games of the Locked Room Murder Mystery game, we basically are creating the adventures of Kilroy and Caddy and their fun associates. So that's the first part of the game, is making these characters, and it'll be different every time. And I think I'll only have the one table here, but like definitely in the future, I could see making a different pack of character, or like a different play set for this sleuth. Like if I do a fantasy pack, but you can have more fantasy related stuff. Yeah, and this table is not like finalized. It's like the first draft. It'll be adjusted as this series goes on. Okay, great. So then the second part of the game is it's called the what do I call it? Meet the suspects. This is where we're gonna meet all the suspects. It follows a very similar structure to the previous thing. In that, basically, and let me see if I can find one. This is my big playtest board, so there's a lot of stuff that goes on. There are going to be these playsets, and the playsets will give a sort of starting pitch. They'll give you potential causes of death that the murder victim is going to experience, and they'll give you ways that the detective is going to arrive in this story. And then after that, they'll give also a big pile of character building blocks, much the same as what we just saw with the sleuth creation. So here's one. This is Huckleberry's Lodge. This is one of kind of the starting ones that I am working on. The idea is there's a rich guy with this, huge art collection that nobody is ever allowed to see. That part is sort of inspired by a book called The Millhouse Murders. So check that out if you want a rich guy with a house in the middle of the woods that see the art in the house, except for once a year. So the idea, yeah, you'll create all these characters that have been invited to go to a very rare showing of all of these art pieces. So the way that works is, again, you've got our table. I'm whipping around. You've got our table of things, and you take turns drawing. There are archetypes, or like character descriptions. There are relationships between two characters, and then there are traits. So characters can have at most one archetype, one trait, and then relationships with or characters that surround them in the journal. So this leads us immediately into the core of this game, which is the journal. It's the play space where you're going to be storing all of the suspects and then the clues that you generate later. So you'll see, the suspects have a name, they have description, they have trait, description, archetype. I'm working on figuring out what exact language that I want to have. And then in these boxes here are their relationships to characters near them. So here you see that Hysteria, the metal drummer, who is full of himself, has a parasocial relationship with Pearl Oxford, the conservative pundit presidential hopeful. But Hysteria also fell for the same scam as Nancy Maud, the farmer, who is unbelievable. That farmer, Nancy, is lovers with the fish magnate, got scammed by Marcel Foe, is ex-lovers with Pinky Huckleberry. Pinky Huckleberry employs Michael Carmichael. You get this big web of characters and start to get a feeling for why a murder is going to happen among these characters. Yeah, you take turns adding these descriptions, these traits, and these relationships from this chart until you've done 20. You go through like the whole deck of 8s through 5 suits, adding one of the 3 things from each card. And then you go through everybody that has been given either a description, a relationship, or a trait, or multiple, and you give them names. And from there, our story is just about ready to begin. Which takes us to the phase of the game called The Story Begins. Here it is in the This is like from the ash can. Um, yeah, and the story begins is where we start really getting into our story. We start seeing what these characters are doing together and building up the conditions for a to occur. The very first part of the story begins. We're going to do a couple of things. First, we're going to draw a card to determine the cause of death, and this will be driven sort of by the playset. And this is something that I'm still tweaking a little bit to make sure it feels good. So in this one, it's just you draw a card, and if it's a spade or a club, cause of death is going to be a gun, and if it's a heart or a diamond, the cause of death will be a knife. And so we know that we could start planting those clues as the story begins. We could put the Chekhov's gun somewhere into our story. And then there's the detective's arrival. You'll draw one more card to determine when the detective arrives. So this is a train playset. So when does the detective board the train? Is it before the first chapter? Happens to be here all along, or is it right after the murder? Like they hear about the murder and they quickly rush to the station to hop on the train and figure this out. And then the number of the card, the rank of the card that you draw for that will give you why the detective's on the train. Maybe they're hired by the victim ahead of time. Maybe they're personally connected to a suspect, or maybe they're just riding the train, right? Like they just happen to be in the area. So that sets the stage for our story. We know when the detective's going to arrive. We know what somebody's going to die of. We have all of these wacky characters that have problems, and then we'll begin. And basically, the way that works is every turn you draw a card, you add the card to our tableau, and then you use that card to move this piece called the killer. There's a killer, and the killer represents sort of the idea, the specter of murder floating over our story. That's going to be sitting on a suspect at any given time. And so when you start your turn, you draw a card. If you draw, say, the 2 of diamonds, and the killer piece is right here, you're going to move the killer 2 spaces, and it starts in the direction, heading out the corner corresponding to diamonds. So in this case, it will go 1, it hits an edge, so it bounces, 2. And now, since it's my turn, I will be setting a scene involving Satya Herringbone, who's a countess that's secretly a private detective in this playset. And in setting that scene, I am trying to come up with a clue that will be very important to solving the murder later. So in this case, it looks like there was something with a camera that involved this character potentially, or yeah, I think these are murder clues. So, maybe I'll say Satya boards the train and she sets her things down in her compartment and moves along, gets sort of an idea of everybody that's on this train, and if the people that she's tracking, as this private detective, she's probably investigating a case of her own. You see her set up a tiny camera in a certain area of the train, whatever. And so then we throw that as a clue that will be important later. You keep doing that. The next player will draw a card, move the killer to wherever, and make a new scene, drop a new clue on the board, until such a time as the cards that we've drawn form a full house. So 3 of one card, 2 of another. At that very moment, instead of moving, as soon as you draw the full house, so it would be the 5th card, it could be the 10th, could be the 10th card up to the 11th card. You'll have at most 11 of these scenes. You will stop. You're not doing a normal scene, because what happens is the character currently visited by the killer piece gets killed. And that is the murder of our murder mystery. The way that works is, we'll stop, we'll step outside this turn-based structure and resolve this together. We'll start thinking of, like, where is this person found? And actually, whoever the killer would have moved to, so if I got like a 1 of clubs and this would have moved here, it will be that character that would have been visited by the killer that finds the murder. So in our case, Philippa Constasco, the train conductor that is nervous about an extremely minor crime that has bad blood with this loud woman, Philippa finds Cassandra murdered and like alerts everybody, gets the story started. Great. I hope this is followable. I think it is. This is basically how I explain it whenever I'm teaching it. People have figured out how to play. So thanks for following along. Yeah. So Philippa finds Cassandra in the way that then the next thing that we do is we look at all of the cards that have been drawn. We count how many of each card, and that is going to give us the crime scene clues, which is from this table, which comes from the playset itself. So in the situation in the game that was played here, we had one ace, and one ace means the train is stopped at a station at the time that we find the murder. We have 3 twos, which means we find the victim's most recent meal untouched. We had 2 threes, which gives us a threatening letter left in a conspicuously obvious place. We had 0 fours, which leads to a general disdain for the victim felt by all passengers. Nobody liked this person that died. And we have 1 5, which gives us a mysterious figure that was seen around the victim's compartment around the presumed time of death. And those all get added as clues. Like you can see here, here's the train stopped at the station for breakfast when Ana Mario finds the victim. We got the mysterious figure, the princess's final meal, because in this game it was the princess that had died. The threatening letter, this kind of stuff all gets added as clues. And then that is the phase where we're ready to begin the investigation. The investigation works much like the story begins, where you'll take turns, you'll draw a card, you'll move the killer, and then you'll set a scene of the investigator investigating somebody. But the way the investigator investigates somebody is a little bit different. There are two more mechanics that get added at this point of the game. First is that of peril, and this is one that I'm sort of reworking, but I can explain basically how it works at the moment, which when the killer lands on somebody during the investigation, you would add a peril to their card. The first peril is okay. But then if you add a second peril, you have to double check if they have any answers to clues. So if the investigator has investigated the link between that character and the clues that are around them in the journal. If yes, so if there are no more than 2, the wording of this is exactly, you'll understand why I need to rework this, because I just got better wording for it, thanks to my friend Quinn, but I'm still bad at it, and I'm still sort of trying to explain it in a way that works for everybody, including me, because it's simple, right? 2 peril means you need 1 answer to protect. 3 peril means you need 2 answers to protect. If you don't have that, so let's say David here has no answers. If the killer lands on David, and David already had 1 peril, when we go to add the second peril, because David's not protected, a plot on David's life occurs. And we'll resolve that. Basically, David might die. And this is the thing that happens in a lot of detective stories, a lot of murder mysteries. There's always like a second attempt, and it's usually, sometimes it's a big plan. They're killing a bunch of people, but usually it's sort of an attempt to cover up the murder as the sleuth is bearing down on them. And it's this whole tragedy of like just random people dropping because the detective hasn't figured it out yet, and the detective goes, I've been such a fool, I can't believe I allowed another one to happen, that kind of thing. Great, so how can you protect characters from that? And that is where the bulk of the turn comes in. So you have drawn your card, the killer has moved along the journal, it has added a peril on somebody, maybe it initiates a plot against their life. Probably not. Or maybe, not probably not. Maybe it has. But then, let's say I drew a 3. Now I can move this sleuth piece 3 spaces and start investigating something. And the spaces that the sleuth can move between are basically the gaps between the clue and the suspects. So any gap between a clue and a suspect is called by the game currently, unless this changes, called by the game a question. A question that lies between that suspect and that clue. Like, why are these 2 linked is sort of the basic question, but maybe detailed. And in order to protect these characters from this ever-present threat of murder, you have to find an answer to that question. And that is what you're doing to set a scene. So if I were to set a scene here, I would be finding the answer between David Devison and the tiny camera, spring wound, set to click at a certain time, or choosing. And so then I'll set a scene. Like, how is the sleuth finding this answer? Are we talking to David? Are we rooting around in somebody's stuff? Are we looking at the film? Are we like developing the film from that camera, and then we see a shot of, we like get an image of David doing something strange but not murderous, or strange and murderous? I don't know. That's what you do, and then you'll put that answer here, like David was filmed or was captured on camera, right? You don't have to go into too much detail. Like, you could leave it at that, and so then if David becomes the murderer, then you can go back and say, yeah, that captured on camera, here we finally get a reveal of what that image was. Yeah, again, you'll keep doing that until you hit a full house, and once you hit a full house, whoever the killer piece rests on, that is the character who is the culprit. That's who did the whole thing. And after that, you go into this sort of more loosey-goosey phase of the summation, where you determine how it happened. Like, what did Shane Shine, the glitter coating salesperson who got away with murder once, like, why did they kill the person that they killed? How does that involve the tiny camera? How does that involve the locket? And furthermore, what were like the dark secrets at the heart of this case? Because you're trying to figure out both the why, or the who, the how, and the why, right? You're, I think, what is it, means, motive, opportunity are the three things that you need in a detective story to be able to have done it. So yeah, the motive, the why, the dark secrets. Everybody's got a dark secret here. What are they? Let's reveal them. Let's get it all out on the table and solve the murder. And then your game's done, right? Once you piece all that together, you're done. You got a whole murder mystery story. You can tell it to your friends. You can write it as a novel. You can do whatever you want with it. Probably just move on with your life. Yeah, that is the current state of Locked Room game. It took me apparently 20 minutes to explain it. So that might be it for this devlog. I'll give a brief glimpse as to what is coming in this series. So this is my if you watch the publishing series, you'll know that I'm working in Jira to try to track everything that I need to do, both for the game design but also for the publishing. And this is the game design list. This is everything that I need to do. You'll see we got the detective creation step. That's done. I showed you that at the beginning of this video. And there's just a big pile of other things I have to do. Clean up journal rules, give guidance for the 14th clue, which you'll notice there are 13 spaces for clues on the board. And there are a few edge cases that have been driving me nuts where you could get a 14th. So I just want to give guidance for that. Guidance for blank suspect cards. You probably may have noticed, in these playtests, we didn't fill out every suspect. And that is okay. Current plan is just the killer piece. If it would land on a blank one, you either make a new character on the spot or you just keep cruising along. Rename the pieces in place. That's the current name for when the murder happens. It's called the pieces in place for murder, and it's fun and funny, but it's not very good as the phase of the game that's like the centerpiece of the game. I don't think I love it that much. Crime scene clue cleanup. This is just making sure that the rules for adding those crime scene clues feel good, because I kind of play it differently than I wrote it. And so I gotta inspect how I'm playing it, because that's probably how I should write it. Yeah. Peril rules, that's the thing I was talking about, where probably the most confusing part of this video, trying to explain that like 3 perils means you're dead unless you have 2 answers. Got ideas for that. We'll come to it in the future. The detective breaking the truth table. This was a bit... Saw it. Yeah, a bit where at the end for the summation, like random determination of how the detective breaks the truth. Like, do they trick the killer into revealing themselves? Do they summon everybody and reveal all their secrets? Do they swoop in right as the wrong person is about to be accused, like by the police? Or do they stage an experiment and recreate every step until the murderer, like, breaks down and says, "All right, I did it." Yeah, that making sure that that feels good, important to me. There's the table of contents as an optional rule in the Ashcan. There's this bit where basically every scene, we call the scenes chapters, and you would name the chapter and end up with this table of contents, which I love. I love having this, but basically every time I play the game, uh, everybody likes it for the first like 9 or so, and then we sort of forget about it, right? Like it serves a good, it serves as a good way to get everybody into it, into the tone, like the theme. But then once you're into it, once the story's really moving, it's almost like a speed bump to be like, oh right, I gotta name the chapter. Let's just call it Fiona's Got the Sauce. And it still can be good, so I want to leave it in there for people, and it's more for probably people that have read a ton of detective novels that have funny chapter names. Yeah. Let's see. I think that is about it. I mean, I'll be back to talk about what changes. I'll be back to probably do some live design, working on some of this stuff. Yeah. Thanks for watching the Locked Room Devlog. I really just needed to speak all this out loud and put it in the same place as the publishing video is, so that I could do the publishing video without feeling like I'm talking too much about the game or feeling like I'm leaving the audience in the dark. So, if you're watching this, thanks. See. We'll see how the game goes. I hope you like the overview. I hope you will like the game. I think it's an incredible game. I'm very proud of it, and also very proud of the fact that I finally maybe made a game that I know how to pitch to people, which is rare for me. I make all of the games that I've made. I feel like I'm very proud of them, and they're very good, but I'm very bad at explaining why you might. Cool. That'll be all. Cheers.